Here's where Mediterranean and DASH patterns diverge meaningfully. Dairy recommendations differ substantially, and that difference reveals important tensions in nutrition science about optimal dairy intake. DASH emphasizes 2 to 3 servings of low-fat dairy daily as sources of calcium, potassium, and protein. Traditional Mediterranean diets include moderate amounts of full-fat fermented dairy, primarily yogurt and cheese, but less total dairy than DASH. Both patterns work, which raises the question, what's the right approach for you? The DASH rationale centers on specific nutrients. Low-fat dairy provides calcium without excessive saturated fat, contributes meaningful potassium for blood pressure management, and delivers high-quality protein. The original DASH trials included dairy as a core component, and some researchers argue that removing it diminishes blood pressure benefits. Studies isolating dairy's effects show modest blood pressure reductions, about 3 to 4 points systolic with 3 servings daily. The Mediterranean perspective views dairy differently. Traditional patterns included fermented dairy, yogurt, kefir, aged cheeses, consumed in smaller amounts. Full-fat versions were standard, and the fermentation process was emphasized. This approach values the probiotic content of fermented dairy, doesn't fear saturated fat from whole food sources, and treats dairy as a condiment or complement rather than a staple. Recent research complicates the low-fat versus full-fat debate. We've learned that full-fat dairy doesn't appear to increase cardiovascular risk as previously assumed. Large prospective studies show neutral or even slightly inverse associations between full-fat dairy consumption and heart disease. The saturated fat in dairy may affect lipid profiles differently than saturated fat from meat, possibly due to the food matrix, calcium, protein, and other components modulating how those fats are metabolized. Fermented dairy specifically shows benefits beyond non-fermented forms. The bacterial fermentation creates bioactive peptides, increases certain vitamins, and may improve nutrient bioavailability. The probiotic content supports gut health, potentially affecting everything from immune function to mental health through the gut-brain axis. Studies comparing fermented versus non-fermented dairy show stronger inverse associations with metabolic disease for fermented forms. However, dairy isn't universally beneficial or necessary. Lactose intolerance affects roughly 65% of the global adult population, concentrated in East Asian, West African, and some Mediterranean populations. For these individuals, dairy causes digestive distress. Lactose-free dairy products or fermented options with reduced lactose become necessary if including dairy at all. Some people experience inflammation or skin issues with dairy. While not true allergy, dairy sensitivity appears real for a subset of individuals. Self-assessment through elimination and reintroduction can identify whether dairy causes problems for you personally. Calcium can be obtained from non-dairy sources: leafy greens, fortified plant milks, sardines with bones, tahini, almonds. You need roughly 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams daily. A cup of fortified almond milk provides 300 to 400 milligrams. A cup of cooked collard greens gives you about 270 milligrams. 3 ounces of sardines with bones provides 325 milligrams. Meeting calcium needs without dairy requires more planning but is absolutely achievable. For people who tolerate dairy well and enjoy it, moderate consumption appears safe and potentially beneficial. The choice between low-fat and full-fat becomes less critical than previously thought. Preference, satiety, and overall dietary pattern matter more. Emphasizing fermented forms like yogurt and kefir provides additional probiotic benefits. The practical recommendation is individualizing dairy intake based on tolerance, preference, and overall dietary pattern. If following DASH strictly for blood pressure management, including low-fat dairy as recommended makes sense. If following Mediterranean patterns, moderate full-fat fermented dairy aligns with traditional practice. If you're lactose intolerant or prefer plant-based eating, ensure adequate calcium from alternative sources and don't force dairy consumption. Quality matters here too. Grass-fed dairy provides better omega-3 to omega-6 ratios and higher levels of certain vitamins. Organic dairy reduces pesticide and hormone exposure. These factors may justify premium pricing for regular dairy consumers. The honest assessment is that dairy represents an optional component of healthy eating patterns, not a requirement, but also not something to avoid without reason.